Hey everybody, it's Doug, and today we're joined by the founders of Those 911 Girls. If you don't know who they are, you're in for a treat today. So join us on another great episode of We Speak Dispatch.
Welcome everybody to another fantastic episode of We Speak Dispatch, because if we are speaking dispatch, hopefully that means that you are speaking dispatch too. So we've got a couple great guests today, but first, let's go around the horn a little bit. Hey Doug, how's it going where you are?
So we're expecting heavy rain and tornadoes tonight, so that's even.
That's exciting. That's
Yeah.
a whole great. How about you, John? What about you? How's things?
Things are very well, doing well.
Excellent. And Joe just came off of, and if you don't know, we're recording this on March 30th, but Joe is coming down off a high after celebrating National Joe Day. So Joe, tell us about how that went and how are things where you are?
I got to text some friends and say, be sure and celebrate National Joe Day. Make sure you celebrate myself. But that is not being very humble. So it was a little out of character for me. So I'll turn the subject to the Major League Baseball opening weekend and say, go Phillies.
How'd your team do?
They're losing last I saw today, 5-0, but they did win their first two games. So 2-0 so far.
So there we go. But I digress. Anyway, so we are joined today by Erika Lackey and Yasmin Barnett, and they are here to tell us about something that is near and dear to their heart called Those 911 Girls. So Erika, tell us about Those 911 Girls and how it got started and what it is.
Sure. Thanks, Leslie. Erika Lakey. I am in Central Florida, 16 years at an agency. I'm near the mouse, so we have a lot of tourists in our area, and I love being in public safety. And being in public safety, we know it's not an easy job, but I've enjoyed every minute of it, and I've been able to find a lot of passion with teaching, with technology, and training others. And I think that's where the idea started, because Yasmin and I worked together and we were always bouncing ideas off each other. And any crazy idea, it was never too crazy. Like talking to her, we would just, like, how can we make this work? But yeah, just being in the industry and helping others come up with resources and being very open and honest with, I don't know the answer, but let me see if I can find that for you. Then we realized, we need a one-stop shop for resources because it's hard unless you know exactly where to look for something. And, we don't have all the answers, but so that's kind of just where it started. And we just brainstormed back and forth to create a one-stop shop, a resource hub for 911 professionals. And then, as we started learning more and more, we would update it and it's just taken off from there. So it's been really fun. And we do it all in our spare time because, when you work in 911, you have so much free time. But we've gotten a lot of great feedback.
That's awesome. So when you talk about resources, and I'm looking at your website, and I'm sure Doug, we'll make sure that that website's posted during this episode. But so, what kind of resources do you have available to public safety employees?
Sure. I think a lot of places are looking for training, especially free training, because we don't have a lot of money in our budgets, as we know. And then it just kind of took off from there, just making them aware of the different resources and then the free money, such as scholarships and any type of opportunities that they can go out and whether it's a free online class, attend a session, or even travel to a conference. There's so many possibilities out there. And so we kind of wanted to put together because I think what we were noticing was a lot of people would find out after a deadline or after another winner was announced somewhere. And it's kind of like, oh, if I'd only had known about that sooner. So that's why we really wanted to kind of put it in front of people and just be able to share it. And then, we're not applying for all these things. We're just simply sharing it. And then I think having, just the platform to do that, we just kind of came up with it together. The social media, we're already on social media anyway. And then we just kind of learned how to create a website and just put it together because that's something I've never done. And so Yaz is really tech savvy as well. So that definitely helps being able to have someone that in your corner that's creative and tech savvy. And we've just been learning back and forth from each other. But yeah, I think mainly training and free money.
Well,
Everybody free money.
Nobody's
Yes.
going to say no to that. What's your agency think of what you guys do? Do they have any feedback on that or say, hey, don't mention us or anything like that?
Well, we're really vendor agnostic, so we try to give everyone an equal platform. If you're offering something, we're going to share it. So we're not agency specific because even what we're doing is very positive and it's not sharing anything negative. We still want to, take the focus off of us and our agency. So it's not about us, it's about the industry and just getting the message out because that's how, we learn a lot is from sharing information. So and in the beginning, a lot of our content was just sharing what other people were putting out there. And even if they went to the original source to share it, now they're connected to a new resource that maybe they didn't know about. So I think it's just very organic, homegrown, and that's how we're trying to keep it because we don't have a lot of time, we don't have a lot of money, but we have a passion, and that's what's kept us going.
Cool. Cool. You guys have a podcast, right? The 901 Collective, is that a podcast or
Yes.
is that how's that doing?
Yeah. I mean, I would love for you guys to jump into because she's like the other half. But yeah, I don't even know who thought of these ideas. It's like, so if you say who thought of this, who thought of that, I really don't even remember because we've just been going back and forth so much. But Yaz does all the audio editing and then I create the graphics and then we just go back and forth for the content for the podcast. But that was kind of intimidating, just saying like, oh my gosh, like a podcast, that's a big, production and that's a lot of time. But for some reason, like just being able to do what we love, like we've made it work. We've been able to squeeze in time and it's been great. Just the two of us going back and forth and then we can, we'll log into the accounts and do what we need to do.
It's funny because Erica and I like practically talk about everything, right? Like she's my closest friend, and every time we see something just in the industry, like it's just a text back and forth. And then finally, we're kind of like, why don't we just talk about this on a grander scale? And ideally, when we created the podcast, we wanted to make it more for the public. We saw that a lot of people out there are doing several things within the space, but we kind of wanted to bridge that out or just at least be another resource to bridge that out to everybody. And so we try to steer a lot of the topics that we talk about towards the public and try to push it out that way so that they get a little bit of a behind the scenes look at 911 themselves.
Yeah. It's one of the like success stories that you guys would say that you've had so far. Like what's if you were gonna brag a little bit like I had to about National Joe Day, what would you guys brag about for your own organization? What would you tell people about if you had to tell a success story?
Have you met anybody that is like gone to a conference because of interactions that they've had with you or stuff like that?
Yeah, I think that was probably the first time that I had somebody who actually looked at those Down One girls and recognized us was probably at a TINA conference, maybe 2 years ago. They came up and they were like, "Hey, you're Yasmin," and I was like, "Yes." And then they were like, those Down One girls," and I was like, "Oh, okay. There's actually people who are looking at this, and we didn't just create this, and nobody's really using it." And so I think that was the biggest one. But then when we created the 911 Collective, we started getting a lot of DMs from different people. And it was people who were like, "Oh, I've been looking at trying to get into 911 and I've been searching and your podcast came up and we love it so far." Or somebody from Canada reached out and they were like, "Hey, liking the podcast so far, would love to jump on and talk about, diversity in 911." And again, we didn't do it with the idea of expecting anybody to write in or really even listen. We were just like, we want to get the data out. And so now when people were actually writing in, we're like, oh, okay, so this is actually making its way. And I think right now the podcast is up for now, I think a month, and we've ended up in 8 countries so far. So
Wow.
really
It's
nice.
only been up a month. Wow,
Yeah.
I think it's longer than that. Holy cats.
Congratulations. That's huge.
Thank you.
That's really big. Yeah.
Yeah,
It is nice. It's weird when you think, podcasting is something relatively new to our world. And it's like when people come up and say, "Hey, I listened to your podcast," or whatever, and it's like, "You did?"
Yes.
What? It's just fun to hear that kind of stuff, that feedback.
Yeah.
So how do you talk about the podcast, especially being geared more toward the public. So how do you get the word out? Because, and we always joke in the public safety space that, we're not normal and the public is normal. So how do you advertise? How do you get the word out to people who may want to have that behind the scenes look at what's going on in the 911 world?
It's been a learning process for sure. And Erica, definitely feel free to jump in here. I think a lot of the times when it comes to marketing ourselves per se, it's hard to do that, right? And so a lot of what I've done is joined podcast Facebook groups. because it's easier to get that out there, at least to start, and try to hit a different audience that's not within 911 and try to actually get them to listen. So a lot of the times we've started with our basics, the most important questions asked in 911, or why dispatchers are asking questions, or the most recent one is the funniest calls that we've had. And, we've thrown in the Florida man calls in there because, of course, with us being in Florida, there's several calls out there. So trying to engage people by understanding that there's a lighter side, but then more than likely, this is probably going to go down the lines of, here's the mental toll that this takes on dispatchers, and here's the other part that maybe people aren't really seeing. And we actually did a special episode for 911 Goes to Washington to make sure that people out there listen to it. And that's probably one of the more listened to episodes that we've had.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, and I think for me, just being in a lot of the dispatcher groups on social media, like what's the common theme? And if there's a heated discussion or maybe more of a negative connotation towards a certain topic, maybe even talking negatively about the public, I look at it as a teachable moment. Okay, we can't change everyone's opinion about us, but if they're coming to these, Facebook groups and this is their perception of what we do and how we treat the public. So I think that's where we kind of get a lot of the topic ideas. Okay, what can we do to educate the public about, like Leah said, what we're doing, but also it might be a teachable moment for other dispatchers. What are you doing to solve the problem? If your community is having an issue understanding something, how are you approaching that as the solutions instead of just, bad mouthing them on social media? And that's not a good look for your agency because we all know how easy it is to look up a name or an agency, and the next thing you know, that could be in the media. So I think, yeah, just having the reframing of, okay, if I need to educate a different audience, sometimes that includes 911 professionals because maybe they just feel overwhelmed because they don't understand some of the technology or some of the laws. And if we can break it down. So even having kids, I love, the explain it like I'm five. If I can teach it to a 5-year-old, I can teach it to anyone, and just knowing your audience. And I'm not saying that the public is like a 5-year-old, but if I can explain it and break it down, then I'm not going to get angry at them. Maybe I just need a chance to educate them a little bit differently instead of hiding behind my keyboard and, trash talking them.
Oh, yeah.
You guys do any
Yeah.
public education stuff? Are you going out into the public and doing anything like that? Not dispatch related, but like the public, bring them in kind of thing?
I think Erika
Um,
does a lot of that right now with
mhm.
the agency.
Yeah, and I'm limited with what I can do because, representing the agency and then also with other, responsibilities and staffing levels, but then being able to go outside of my agency as a conference speaker and then create content for other platforms. So I do have the opportunity. So yeah, we are getting pulled in different directions. But yeah, I love teaching anywhere from the kindergartners all the way to the elderly communities, and then even like businesses and hotels with the different regulations out there. So it is a different message for each audience. So I think we really love that challenge because we understand 911 from the dispatcher perspective and now the 911 professional perspective. We can go back and forth and have a more open and honest dialogue, but then also, break it down to each audience. And I think that's important because it's not the same message for everyone. Like we're lucky if the public knows it's 911. Great. I'll start from there and then I'll go up based on whatever your education or your age or your understanding is. And by teaching a lot of the new hires that come into our agency is a great way to kind of see what is the public's perception when they come into this job, and they just know it's going to be a steady paycheck, and they know the number to 911. So I'm okay with that. I love that because then I can start from the very foundational and build up, and then I want them to understand the technical reasons why they're doing this job, and when you create a trouble ticket, what do I need on that, and then how it's all connected. So I love being able to see the full picture. And then because they just came from the public themselves. So that's a great way to see, okay, this is their understanding and what's a good message to get back to them.
Yeah, I know when I
Yeah.
lived in California, I knew a lot of the people in the news, and they loved hearing from us. And we would go do a lot of stuff with the media and stuff like that. They love that kind of stuff. The message, they're sick of the negative stuff. They want some positive. Why do we need 911 so much? And I always tell people, like, that's who wants your message. Those people out there, they want your message. And sometimes people are just avoiding the media, like, oh no, they're negative or whatever. But they're just looking for a good story. If you've got one, that's what they want. So,
Oh, yeah.
my
And
advice.
I think it's really, it's difficult because you've got people who are working in comm centers that have, staff 100 people a shift. And then you've got other agencies that, you're the only person in the room and you're also, doing walk-ins from the lobby and matron duties from the jail and all this other stuff. So just to bring everybody kind of together to understand that, hey, the profession, we all answer 911 and we ask similar questions, but the way we provide service is a little bit different. And I'm looking at all your resources about giving back to the people who are actually answering those calls and letting them know, hey, there's training. Hey, because how many times we've had guests on our podcast where they didn't know about training, or like you said, Erika, it's always, we don't have the budget for it. So nobody gets trained. So I love all of that. So how are you garnering all of that information? Do people just send it in? Or are you like always searching websites for upcoming conferences? How does that work?
Pretty much just looking always at different groups, right? When we first started, uh, when we were doing research for our conference sessions, we could never find everything in one place. So that's when we started, knowing somebody here, knowing somebody there. And finally, we just sat down one weekend and we just compiled everything that we found across social media, different websites, and we just put them all. And every time we would add in a new resource, we would make sure to reach out to everybody and say, hey, what description do you want on the site? What picture do you want on the site? Because this was as much theirs as it was ours, right? This was made for everybody else out there. And we wanted to make sure that each person and each resource that we put out there was appropriately placed for that person. So yeah, a lot of the times we're getting other resources from different people who are just submitting them through the sites, and we'll just continue to update them and try to keep them as updated as we can.
Yeah.
I know when I teach classes, I have a list of like resources available, and I'm always surprised about how many people are like, "Oh, when did they get that out there? When is it?" And I'm like, "People, it's there. Maybe you didn't know about it. But you got to kind of like get out of your bubble and go see what's going on." So yeah, it's a big
Yeah, you don't know what you don't know. And then, yeah.
Right.
And sometimes it is a simple Google search, but also if you don't know what you're, Googling, then so
Right.
you're kind of you're stuck in this cycle. So, but I
Yeah.
think also what helps is branching outside of public safety. So I'm also like a car seat technician. So there's another, industry that works to, closely with 911. So there's all these opportunities outside of 911 that I can learn about, and it might benefit us or it might not. But then there's another conversation we can have. And then even creating the podcast, I have a friend that's a nurse, and obviously we know how they fall into the care cycle, but she didn't realize everything that we went through. So I'm starting to find more like people that we work with every day in different capacities, like they don't fully understand what we do. So I think it's great that we're able to have these conversations and without attacking each other, pointing the finger, and not just during when it's that one bad call or that one really good call. Like we need to have the conversations all the time so that way we can come together more and, hopefully start changing the landscape.
Yeah, there's definitely, and it seems like y'all are doing a great job of trying to break down those walls where 911 used to be the super secret thing and nobody knew really what was going on. And, we all benefit from working together and understanding people's perspectives and where they're coming from and all this other stuff. So, hats off to you and huge kudos to what it is that you're doing. I think that's amazing. And you're gonna have to come back on and let us know, where your podcast is going. We'll definitely make sure that people know the 911 Collective and get on there and take a listen, because now I want to go. I want to hear what the funniest calls were that you had in your back pocket, because I know we all have stories.
I'm on their website right now, Leslie, Doug, and John, and they obviously know what's on their website, so I'm going to see if I can stump you guys. Collectively, between the four of us, I'm guessing we have 100 years of 911 service. That just makes us old. But one of the conferences that they have listed under the 911 resources, and hopefully you guys are not on their website and are not going to cheat here, is the One Team, One Mission Dispatcher Symposium. And if I asked you if you had heard of that or where it is, why don't you guys go ahead and tell the 911 people out there where that? See, I'm seeing a bunch of no's. So you guys are already making a huge difference. 100 years of experience here on this podcast. And I pulled it up and not heard of that while you guys were talking. And I just asked them and they don't know. So the difference you guys are making is huge. You're getting your word out there. Congratulations to you guys, because you're educating people that have years of experience or no years of experience of what's available to them to get out there. And I'm going to give a shout out to one of my favorite states. It's actually in 2024 was in Idaho, which is one of my favorite.
Yeah. And Joe, it's funny you mentioned that, because that's the one. And I'm like, okay, Denise Amberly, I know, some of these, the Tenacious, I got that. But yeah, One Team, One Mission, never heard of it. So awesome. Love that. Very cool. Well, thank you all for coming on. It was amazing to talk to you and get a little insight as to what you're doing. And we look forward to having you on again in the coming weeks and celebrating all the great things that you do.
Thank you guys for having us
Awesome. Thank you
on.
so much.
Coming
Right.
by.
All right.
You're not going to
See
have
you
Joe say
later.
anything else there, Leslie?
Oh yeah, Joe. Hey Joe. Tell us about how's our
Something
podcast?
new going on.
Yeah. Well, first of all, congratulations to them and already being in different countries. By no means is this the one up. We always end our podcast like this. We need one of the countries out there to join us to reach 60 different countries. And we're nearing 40,000 plays since we started. So make sure you're listening to us and those 911 Girls, the collective, as the podcasts out there. We hope everybody will listen to us so we can share our resources as well.